All right, and we are live with a new Ideas from the Edge. I am extremely excited today to be speaking with Vlad, the founder of Kagi. Welcome, Vlad.
Thanks for having me, Max. Glad to be here.
Awesome, man. And so we're going to talk about a lot of things. I know Nostr is sort of the topic du jour for us, something we've been talking a lot about as you guys made a big splash, making your presence known on Nostr yesterday, which was exciting for me, exciting for the community. But, as I mentioned to you, the thesis behind Ideas for the Edge is that people that are into things like an ad-free internet, like Bitcoin, like Nostr, are interested in all kinds of crazy rabbit holes. And so one place I'd like to start with you is a story called The Egg. And on a Stacker News AMA you did about a year ago, you mentioned that you think that this is potentially a decent model for reality. So without giving it all away, the story describes a vision of reality where maybe God fractals into every conscious being that has ever been or will ever being in existence. Why do you like this story, and why do you think that's a good model for reality if you still do?
Okay, we are going deep philosophy straight from the beginning. Let's do it. So the Egg is a short story by Andy Weir. He is also the author of Martian, more famously known for that. And it's really a story that tries to describe a philosophy of life that many religions also try to do. The difference is he does this in basically a one-pager short story. And the main idea of the story is that uh, we are all one, that there is only one being that have lived all of our lives, and which means you are me and I'm you, and I'm also every human that ever lived. I'm, both Adolf Hitler and Mother Teresa. And I'm everybody basically, and it has profound implications. And by the way, once you live through all the lives, you become a god or join the gods. So that's the synopsis of, but it has the profound implication, at least to me, like in the way you look at the world and fellow human beings. And if you are hurting somebody, for example, you're basically hurting yourself, and it's sort of a very profound implication. So, not to go too deep into that, I invite everybody to read it. And I always thought that that story would make for a good religion. Like somebody should start a religion based on it. It's a very simple to understand and sort of very impactful if it resonates with you. And it's sort of a, try to be good sort of a religion, right? So that's what attracted me to it, and sort of resonates very strongly with me.
And do you still think that that is a good, pretty descriptive model of how reality actually works? And if so, obviously it resonates. Is that sort of it's just kind of the main sort of vibe or gut feel, or are there other reasons you feel like maybe that's the best sort of religious model you've come across?
Yeah, so throughout the ages, I think religions have been trying to give us a playbook for how to live your life. And whether you're religious or not, you have to appreciate the complexity, the deep thought, and um, the knowledge that went into these books. And whatever of the main religions we are talking about, these are very deep, profound books that you can interpret in many different ways. Um, and I was talking, interestingly enough, with a friend of mine who's quantum physicist, and when we meet, we often have these sort of discussions. He's approaching it from a very different side, but we sort of end up in a same point where these books are basically a playbook to life. None of them, you don't have to, consider all of them true or working for you, but they provide a way to interpret reality. And interpreting reality is very, very hard. There's, even if you approach it from a purely scientific angle, there's so many questions that don't have an answer wherever you dig. It's not just profound questions like how the universe began and things like that, but basically our understanding of of anything is very, very superficial. So I think having the reference or at least a playbook that you can choose to accept or ignore, I think that's a pretty powerful thing. It's like a cheat sheet to a very hard video game. Um, so yeah, that's how I look at these kind of things, and then you find one that resonates with you, and this story by Andy Weir did with me. So
You mentioned talking a little about just kind of the substrate of reality and trying to understand what is. I also remember from reading your background that you are a physicist by training, I believe. So, two-part question. One, what sort of physics were you interested in and are interested in now? And two, would you consider yourself a materialist or something beyond
yeah, so I'm not a physicist by training. I am a failed physicist by training. That was
that?
what I was supposed to be,
Fair enough. Fair
but
enough.
and I had a substantial interest in physics. I went on to compete in physics competitions and things like that. Um, but I ended up studying computer science and having a very different career. Um, yeah, I tend to be agnostic, uh, and while I'm definitely a person of science, and as an engineer, try to sort of always decompose reality and try to explain it in a rational way. I would also say that I'm a scholar of religion in a curious exploratory way, and I like to read about religion. I like to watch debates about religion, especially between religious people and scientists. And I always think you can learn a lot from both sides. And people have spent a lot of time thinking about these things for thousands of years. And the fact that things are still not that clear, tells you a lot about the depth and complexity of these issues. So I think it's a good exploration for a curious mind to be sort of curious and then try to approach things from both ends and see, you know, what sort of a playbook resonates with them. And there's no one playbook that resonates with everybody because then, everybody's lives would be the same. Or are they, as Andy Weir says? So,
So to recap, so we talked a little bit about some of Vlad's views on the egg, physics, metaphysics, materialism. You mentioned you obviously physics was your first love, but since then you've become an engineer, and you've become, I guess, an entrepreneur by trade. And so, I know we're going to talk a lot about search because that's where you're focused today with Kagi. Was search your first love? I don't know if I've actually read before. I know you sold a company previously to GoDaddy. Maybe you've had a couple of other companies. Were they also related to search, or what was your first set of interest in computer science before you got into search?
yeah, I would say that the web is my first love.
Mm.
I wrote my first email in '95. I remember that moment vividly. A magical net fell to be able to communicate with somebody instantly. Um, and then I started working more seriously with the web in the early 2000s, and it just felt like this Wild West where
Mm.
everybody is, discovering gold mines and, um, sort of trying to create new interesting technologies. And I learned a lot. I had a blog. I was involved in a community, in a WordPress community, which
Oh,
is
cool.
this blogging platform, for a number of years, and wrote and published a book about WordPress development. And basically, my main interest was around the web and web technologies. And eventually, I ended up creating a company that helped manage websites. And we had about 500,000 websites, or clients at the time. The company was sold in 2016. Doing updates, backups, security, things for and all those sorts of things. So yeah, I would say before I started working on the search engine, I had deep and intimate knowledge of the web. I definitely had the recollection of the early days of web when everybody had those quirky
Hmm.
websites with a lot of colors and strange fonts and things like that. I was no exception.
Hmm.
Um,
Good times.
and yeah, good times that I
Yeah.
that I'm trying to get back in some way with what we are doing. Um, yeah, so those things eventually led to Kagi, the search engine, and we can talk more about that.
Yeah. So, one thing I guess before we jump into Kagi and search specifically, those early days of the web, um, I think you, like a lot of the Nostr community, really loved it, myself included, actually. I mean, I was a kid at the time, but it was so much fun to just find these weird rabbit holes, these like bizarre corners of the web. Sometimes you would find, complete utter brilliance on these weird blogs from some rando. Sometimes, or oftentimes, you would find complete and utter nonsense and quacks. But that too was part of the fun, like sifting through all of it and just, yeah, keeping things weird and quirky. I know we'll talk about why you think the age of PageRank is over. Do you think it was inevitable, though, that the web had to go through this first sort of centralizing and, I don't know, sort of like corporate takeover, if you will? Do you think that that was a necessary stage before we hopefully get to rewild the web, or do you think that was somewhat of a unfortunate anomaly or detour for where the web is headed?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, first of all, those weird, quirky corners of the web still exist today.
Hmm.
They are just not easy to find in the legacy search engines and in the way we consume the web today. And it's one of the things that we are trying to change, and we can talk more about how. But So what happened in the early 2000s was Web 2.0, which created a bunch of technologies and companies. Um, and the unfortunate thing was that these companies adopted the ad-based search model, and the ad-based model basically became the predominant economy of the web.
Right.
you know, Slowly in the beginning, but over the 20 years, we all know what the web looks like today. And basically, there's no social media website, there's no search engine, there's no browser for that matter that's not uh, funded by ads and advertising, right? And Kagi is a very rare exception. Um, and Nostr for that matter, for example, if we are talking about social media. But basically, um, that business model was adopted, although Google founders, for example, very well knew that placing ads in the search results will create bad outcomes for the users. So they stated this in '98 in their famous white paper. And yet this new startup, this new search startup adopted ads just a few years later as their predominant model for the web, and then later Facebook a couple of years later. Um, and the entirety of the web was changed. Now, to their credit, they did democratize access to information. So at least in the early days of Google and the early days of Facebook, you as a user still got more value than what was extracted from you. So to speak. So everybody was, excited about this. You can suddenly find anything on the web in, 500 milliseconds or something like that, and you can connect with your relatives and friends, in these early social media products. But over the years, because the incentives were misaligned by the nature of this business model, you were not the customer. You were basically a product, and the currency was your data. We came to this state of the world today where basically everything you do on any of these mainstream websites, social media, and browsers for that matter, is being tracked, used, and mostly used to target you with advertising. So was that necessary? I don't know. We all liked the benefits in the beginning, The problem is you couldn't pull a handbrake. Those companies, with the shareholder pressure, the business model was very profitable, and you're just incentivized by the nature of that business model to go for more and more. So while I don't know whether that could have been different, I know it can be different now. And that is what we are trying to do. And because basically this current state of things is leading us toward a dystopian state of society,
Definitely.
where at least from a standpoint of information consumption, we are consuming information through third parties and intermediaries, and not directly from the source of information, which means any search you make on a mainstream legacy search engine, there is advertiser and third party interest between you and the source of information, which does a lot of bad things. One of them is you are not necessarily getting the best information. You're getting information that somebody paid the most for, or what a centralized entity thinks you should see, not necessarily what is the best for you. And Kagi is trying to change that with a very transparent business model. You pay for your search engine, and if that search engine is bad or does not give you control, you walk away with your wallet, and that's a pretty strong feedback loop that ensures alignment of incentives, and then by um, further ensures that the product has your best interest in mind. So
Yeah. And so for those who are not yet familiar with Kagi, just to make this super clear, it's a paid search engine. I believe the basic product is $10 a month, and then there's a premium version, which is a bit more and has some extra features. But $10 a month for unlimited searches. And the gist of it is laid out in a beautiful essay that you wrote, a manifesto, I would say, called The Age of PageRank is Over. Anyone that's listening to this should definitely head over to the Kagi blog and read that. It's fantastic. And you lay out some of these really interesting insights, including the fact that Larry and Sergey actually called the death of their own business in 98 when they basically said that if, the user and the customer are different people, eventually, those two interests are going to be at odds. And maybe it's like the frog boiling, but over time, the quality of actual search, is going to be worse if someone else is paying to put other information in that search. Like that seems like a very true and almost like just factual statement. Um, However, to your point and what we were discussing, at that time, advertising was the only really business model that worked for most businesses. Now we've heard, Jack Dorsey, who obviously was the founder of Twitter and Square, and now very focused on Nostr. He's made the point many times over that if he had had Bitcoin and Lightning Network, or at least some kind of easy payments online, even when he was starting Twitter, that maybe they would have been able to monetize in a different way. And Google came even earlier. I know you do some stuff with Bitcoin Lightning payments. The vast majority of your stuff is traditional. I'm assuming Stripe or some other sort of normal payment
right.
gateway. Do you think is that the big difference now? Is just that you have access to payments, whereas Larry and Sergey didn't in '98, or is it something else?
I think it's a difference just in philosophy. So they were very well aware that ads do not belong in search. They said it quite clear in their white paper that basically defined PageRank and Google. So, but they at the same time they were a VC funded company, and the purpose of most VC funded companies is growth. Um, that's basically the purpose. So I think while they may have, philosophically believed that that's, having ads in inside search is not the right thing to do, the shareholder pressure was just so immense. And the company was growing, obviously, right? So Google
Did
was
well.
growing at an incredible speed. So if you are a founder of a startup and your company is growing like crazy, you may want to rethink some of your priorities, I guess. So I don't think they lacked anything. And what they may have lacked is just the insight into how much damage that business model will eventually do across the time span of 2 decades to the web. Because it probably wasn't that easy to foresee that Google will become one of the largest tech companies in the world, and the ads will become the basis of the web economy. Like, it was probably very hard to see that in 2001 as it is today. I would say that in their defense, I don't know what would they do back then if they knew exactly what this will turn into, and what is the reality of the online world and digital world today.
Right.
Maybe they would have done differently. But I'm pretty sure that a lot of people at Google, including the top executives, including Larry and Sergey, have an ad blocker in their browser.
Yeah, obviously.
I would be very surprised if they don't. And if they do, that's a very powerful statement against the very business model they built. And you can really not browse the web these days without an ad blocker. And I think 800 million people have an ad blocker. They say it's the biggest protest against the business model in human history. Um, so, so yeah.
Well, so let's talk about this from two different angles. Because on the one hand, I think from just like the human being perspective, there's no question that ads are just not only something that I personally detest, and I think many people do. To your point, 800 million at least with ad blockers. But also, I think you mentioned in one of your blogs something that resonated with me, which is its tax on using the web for, frankly, like the poorest, and like it's like really shitty. It's like anyone that is at least somewhat sophisticated, I would be shocked if they don't have ad blockers everywhere. So all of the people, it's crazy. Even like all the Nostr users, we're all fighting for this and excited about it. But the reality is, we all use ad blockers. It's not that bad. But for billions of people that don't even know this exists, like that's kind of who you're preying on, and that seems particularly pernicious, which is sad. So that's kind of the human piece of it. But then from the
Mm.
business model perspective, to be clear, I mean, you clearly are someone that is influenced by not wanting your kids to see ads, influenced by the egg, but you're also an entrepreneur. You're a business guy. You're a capitalist. You're certainly not against making money. And I think it would be very interesting to maybe go into details. I just checked your live stats. You're at 34 and a half, almost 35,000 paying users. So that's $350,000 ish per month, probably more with some of the upgraded paid plans. That's real revenue. I know a lot of these users, from what I can tell, are sort of hacker news types that love the ethos of paying for a product and not supporting ads and potentially better results. Is that a niche product? I know you've mentioned that YouTube has 50 million subscribers, so clearly it could get much bigger. How big do you think a user funded like subscription model can get relative to some of these ad based business models?
Yeah. Well, first of all, let's go to this being a tax on using the web paid by the least tech savvy. Yes, ads are basically a tax on using the web paid by people who don't have an ad blocker, basically. And that's a sad state of things. And what's even more interesting is that the FBI has an official recommendation. You can find it on their website for American citizens to install and use an ad blocker.
Really?
And this is because there are a lot of malicious ads
Wow.
appearing in Google search results that lead people to these malicious websites that steal credit card information and things like that. So the U.S. government basically has an official recommendation for its citizens to use an ad blocker.
That's
Obviously, not a
insane.
lot of people know about it. It's buried as a memo on the FBI website, but you can find it
Hmm.
if you know it exists. And just imagine if everybody helped their friend and relatives install an ad blocker, all of a sudden the most powerful tech company in the world would cease to exist. And because all of these people would be better off with an ad blocker, basically that company has a ridiculously high risk profile.
It's true.
Like, what's standing between them and bankruptcy is just people getting a bit more educated about the web.
Yeah.
That's literally everything that prevents them from going bankrupt. because once everybody would know about ad blockers and how to install one or get a browser that has one installed by default, their company doesn't exist anymore. It's astonishing just to think about it. Um, so how many people would pay for a search engine? I think 50 million or 20 million people pay for YouTube Premium just not to see ads. It's astonishingly high number, and I would say that what we offer is much more valuable than seeing YouTube without ads. Actually having access to information that is of better quality. Almost everybody who uses Kagi says it's the best search engine in the world. This is the biggest reason people pay for Kagi. So you're having access to information that is created in your best interest always. You are in full control. You can personalize your search feed. You can, block websites you don't like or get more of the websites you like. You're in full control of this product, and the product is created only for you, and all the innovation in the product happens because of you, the user, who's also the customer. I think that's a profound value proposition. So I'm sure there are probably millions of people out there who would use and pay for Kagi right now if they knew about it. The thing is that we had zero marketing spent ever, and it's mostly word of mouth through communities like yours, like Hacker News, like Reddit. And this is how Kagi has been growing. So complete organic growth, and we have live stats on our website. Everybody can check that out and see it in real time.
Yeah, that's super cool. In terms of just business models, I mean, why do you think that Google has not yet offered a premium version of the Google search engine? If they've done it for YouTube, and obviously they have a great search engine, why don't they let people pay for it as well?
That's a good question. I would think that they are thinking about it um, because of the public pressure, because of more and more people awakening to the fact that the the alignment of incentives is not there. There is a conflict of interest.
Hmm.
And personally, when I started thinking about Kagi in 2018, I did it for two reasons, and one of them was that I just thought that Google's search results were insulting my intelligence.
Yeah,
And I didn't see that until 2018. And, it took me 15 years to sort of wake from the matrix and just see that the choices that they made in the way that, results are decided and then presented to the user. Like nobody's sane would do that. If there were no search engines, then they put like 100 smartest people, like designers and engineers and product in one room and say, design a search engine. And if somebody came up with an idea that looked like Google did in 2018, they would throw them out of the room, like because it was so much insulting the intelligence of the user. But what was the profound discovery was that I was not who were they optimizing for. I
right.
always thought like, that product had my best interest in mind, and the profound revelation was that the actual customer is the advertiser, and they are doing a lot of things to please that customer who's putting money in their pocket. Now, I think it would be a very fair proposition for them to offer a paid version where they would actually optimize the search experience for the people using them. So that means no ads, no results littered by ads and things like that. But I think they would potentially fundamentally make a statement against their main business model by doing that. And there's
Yeah,
again conflict of interest. Um, so so yeah, I think that is the main reason they are not doing that. But there are other companies that are trying to do that. Most notably, OpenAI is, at least for now, a paid business model. We'll see what happens in the future.
yeah. I'm not sure. I trust Sam fully there to have my best interest at heart either. So we'll see. Um,
Yeah.
so that's very interesting to me, and it's interesting also that you mentioned it took until 2018 for you to notice
Yeah.
that the search and results are not in your best interest. And it's interesting because we part of the reason we met is I also started thinking about this a little bit later than you, but maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I wrote a piece called "How to Disrupt Google," and my thesis was I read a piece from DKB, who I know did an interview with you, and he's written some really nice stuff. And I saw he blew up on Hacker News, basically just saying that Google is dying, and that for the vanguard of Hacker News type users, the sort of the chronically online, that results are just getting worse and worse. The frog is boiling over time. Too many ads, too many listicles, not enough real backlinking anymore. It's all paid backlinking or scams. And that really woke me up. And then I started thinking he had some ideas around market rank. And that's kind of, for me, the light bulb went off for a product idea that I still would love to see. And who knows, maybe one day it'll be Kagi that does this, or someone else. But this thesis I'm still very interested in, which is this idea of what I would call value rank, which is if you buy, as many in our community do, that what Bitcoin actually is, forget cryptocurrency, forget currency, forget all that stuff. What Bitcoin is it's energy backed money, as predicted by Tesla, Henry Ford, Edison, Buckminster Fuller, many of the great minds in human history. It's a ledger of kilowatt hours, and this one ledger is going to be fundamentally scarce. So this idea that I've been thinking about, that you sort of email me about right around the time I actually messaged you. It was funny. I remember we messaged each other within 24 hours on separate platforms, which was a nice little synchronicity. But the idea was basically, could you use a scarce energy-backed form of value to sort of associate that with information in a way that's ungameable, because you can't print more Bitcoin. I'm curious, is this an idea that you've thought about any more since then? I know it was not necessarily your focus, but it's certainly something that I still think about from time to time.
Well, let's explore your idea. I'm happy to learn a little bit more about
Yeah,
it and refresh my memory.
sure,
So
sure.
so basically, the main premise of search is that search itself is not free.
Right.
By searching the entirety of the web in under 500 milliseconds is an extremely expensive thing,
Hmm.
even when you do it at scale. So somebody has to pay for it,
Yeah.
right? So in my universe, there was only one business model that basically fuels 99% of searches today, which is advertisers pay for it. And then came Kagi and said, we're gonna offer another option, but you are paying for your searches and in control of them.
Right.
So can you explain to me how would the value rank work in that model?
Yeah, and to be clear, I don't know I have it completely figured out. And actually, maybe this will kind of dovetail nicely into Nostr, because when I wrote this essay, it was I think Nostr existed, but it was fewer than 100 people using it. So it was pre me playing with Nostr and knowing about it. But the thesis is not necessarily that, it's forget the business model for a second. Maybe it's paid, maybe it's ads, whatever, maybe it's something else. The fundamental insight that I had or was trying to get across is that in a world where information is already infinite and about to go much more infinite with AI, there's just this overabundance. So we're already drowning information, and it's going to get much worse. If you assume, like many of us do in the Bitcoin community, that Bitcoin is sort of a terminal state, the only, let's say, form of digital capital that can't be created out of thin air because it's backed by energy. And so if you kind of accept this premise that Bitcoin is energy backed money, it can't be printed. There's only 21 million coins. Of course, you can move that out 9 decimal places, but assume for a minute that it's the only form of scarce value there is in the world. And I think that's going to become increasingly obvious over time. If that's the case, then my kind of thesis was, originally, I didn't know how you would associate with this with identity, but in a world where information is infinite, value is scarce. If you can associate value with information, scarce value with infinite information, then that's a new way to rank that value that can't be gamed because the money can't be printed. And so then the thesis was, the part that I didn't have solved at that point, but something I think is even more interesting now with Nostr is, okay, well, you don't want to do a pure market rank or a pure value rank. And to be clear, I borrowed a lot of these ideas from DKB's market rank piece. I'm just kind of adding the Bitcoin thing in. But, you know, the issue that I had was, how do you sort of build a reputation around the value as well? Because, for example, if I have a study that I publish and it says smoking is really great for you, and someone comes in and zaps at the equivalent of $1 million in Bitcoin, how do I know that's not from Marlboro or some interested actor that's trying to game the system and can make more money by, sort of lying to me. Well, I didn't have a really good answer for that at the time I wrote that essay. Now my answer would be if there is a user owned, open, and interoperable identity standard for the web, and you can associate each payment to a piece of information or each payment associated with a piece of information to a public key, then you can build up reputation. And maybe value rank is only one of the many ranking standards you use in there. But then what you could start doing is, as a very simple or naive example, imagine you're just looking at Nostr. And in Nostr, as you're well aware, you have the ability to tip people little units of Bitcoin via the Lightning Network. The idea being that with that public key, whatever's zapping information, now you can start to kind of build a graph of who is zapping who and who is zapping what more particularly, and start to rank the information.
Right. Well, there are many ideas there. So let's try to unpack so it is mostly about the way I understand it is the what you're talking about is mostly around the problem of ranking.
Yep.
So if you are searching for something, there are potentially millions of pages about it, and which one you agree to be top 10,
Mhm.
right? And the system you propose is basically doing that based on people vouching with their
With their
money,
money.
influence, credibility, whatever the currency is
Correct.
for a certain page. And you also rightfully outline, potential dangers in gaming the system, where if it's purely money, well, a big bad brand can come in and zap millions. Where if the system also has some sort of credibility or, influence, so if you do that and you can potentially lose credibility and things like that. So probably that would make more sense. I mean, the interesting thing is that the problem of ranking, obviously in search, has been one of the biggest problems since the inception of search engines. And Google actually made a big break with the invention of PageRank,
Right.
which basically used academic style citation system, basically saying if a website links to another website, then it's more credible, and more sites linking to each other. I, interestingly, I don't think that that's the case anymore, and I will come back to the business model because it is the primary driver of what a search product shows to their user. In an ad-based search model, you basically want the user to interact with your product as much as possible because that optimizes for ad revenue directly. Obviously, the more interactions you have, the more money you're potentially making because there are more interactions with ads. So in that sense, ad-based search engines, although they could apply any algorithm, including yours, are more likely to apply an algorithm that optimizes for this very thing, which means that they need only to be barely good enough for you not to be frustrated all the time. But they, at the same time, have a conflict of interest and want you basically not to find what you're looking for. So you search for something, get some results, you click through, you come back, it's not what you wanted, you search again, right? So there's this conflict of interest inherent inside the product, which basically, even if they could create any algorithm, they would probably still not use it. As long as they can get away with more profitable one. And so for Kagi, it's a little bit different. And one of the things we do, for example, is we downrank. Now talking about Signal, is sort of a value rank, but something that's practical and can be implemented right away is what we do, and that's we count the number of ads and trackers on each website and
I love
downrank
that.
those that have a ton,
Yeah, that's great.
because the number of ads and trackers are usually directly correlated with content. Like the more you have, the content is crappier in a
Yeah,
way.
totally.
And once you are over some threshold, you can almost 100% say that the content was created for the purpose of monetizing with ads, and not for the purpose of informing and educating, but was probably mass produced and it's just low quality. So that's, for example, one thing that we do. And basically putting ads and trackers on your site is a signal to us that your site is probably crappy. So that's one of the things that Kagi does. And I do like the parallel that you, and it's a deeper discussion. We can go into that. I really like that inside the Nostr platform, to which I'm a newbie. Just to make that clear to your listeners. But the mechanism of zapping something, basically having a way to microtransact with content you love, is fundamentally missing inside the open web. And I always wonder, why isn't there a mechanism built into browsers, for
Yeah.
example, where I can just, when I see a piece of content I like, I can reward the creator directly. And although there is a web standard for that defined for 6 or 7 years now, the major browser companies never implemented it. And we are very eager to do that once resources allow. We are a small company, but we have our own web browser. And that's something I really, really want to do, and sort of copy this idea or implementation, maybe even from the Nostr technology and community, because I think that's a very powerful way to offer an alternative economy for the web.
Yes.
Because if you remove the ads, there needs to be economy powering it. And so what is it? And currently, it's so hard to do microtransactions for anyone. And so this is, I think, the main barrier to adoption there, because it's not a mainstream, but we'd love to do something about it.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and jump right in then. I mean, we've already started talking about Nostr. So, for anyone that's not familiar, we're recording this on November 22nd. I think it was just yesterday, November 21st, that you guys may have had an account for longer. So correct me if I'm on there, but yesterday, at least, you guys got involved on Nostr. You came out and you said, "Hey, Nostr community, we're here. We Kagi want to get involved with your community, potentially build things that are useful to you guys, and vice versa. Hopefully, the Nostr community will get value out of Kagi as well." Would love to just hear more about what got you purple pilled, as we call it, Nostr pilled, and what questions do you have? I mean, I have tons of ideas. I'm sure the people listening to this will have way better ideas than I do. But how do we make the web great again with Nostr and with Kagi?
Yeah. Yeah, as I said, I want to make this clear. I'm not a Bitcoin guy, and my only sort of interaction with Bitcoin was 10 years ago when I bought 10 Bitcoin and then sold it next year, being very happy about
Boating accident?
4,000.
I'm just kidding.
I was like, I made like $4,000. I was like, wow, this was like the biggest trade of all time, and I was quite happy with that. So that's sort of my background with Bitcoin, just to make that clear. But what I learned was the Nostr community is very philosophically aligned with what we are doing. We're just, I think, approaching it from a whole different perspective, but it's sort of converging towards similar main themes around privacy, about user control, and about this ability to, sort of directly influence your own fate. And we are trying to do that in the context of search and browsers, where this community may be, coming from a different angle. But I think those three main themes are very, uniquely connected to what we are doing. And I think there's a lot we can learn from this community who has been, engaged in this for quite a long time. And I think we can also offer a lot to this community, coming perhaps from a different perspective, but converging towards the same goals. So that's why, we started our presence yesterday. We were greeted by a lot of people, and many of them are already Kagi customers, which I was quite happy to see.
Yeah, it's
We
awesome.
basically didn't have a welcome squad like that on any other social network that we participate in. But that was quite awesome to see, and I'm pretty excited to see what comes out of it. And I already spent my day studying the Nostr protocol today,
Oh,
which is,
good.
it's quite simple. It would
Yeah, it's
be
basic.
embarrassing not to know how it works. And it's, basically 100 lines of text, which makes it very powerful. And so I'm already educating myself and trying to understand, what we can do to help and integrate some of these technologies and ideas into our products. And, some of that we already touched on with these microtransactions. I'm very interested in getting an idea like that into a general purpose search engine and a general purpose browser. So
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I don't know how deep you want to go, and with the caveat that obviously I'm, fairly deep in Nostr, but not one of the developers myself. Like, I have some ideas, but I'm curious to hear what sort of ideas have come up for you so far, and how you guys might want to work with the Nostr community, and what questions you have. I mean, if I can't answer them, then we can certainly get answers, I'm sure, in the comments from people that can.
yeah, I'm at the very beginning of that journey. So apart from understanding the philosophical alignment, I still have to understand the technology and
Mhm.
how we can work with it.
Yeah,
So that's still to come. But what I really liked was the how easy it is to zap a piece of content.
yeah,
And what I heard in the, the last 24 hours, there are creators that have been very successful, for example, on Spotify, that now are able to make more money by being a creator on Nostr,
that's right.
where it's just so much easier for people who like a song, an album, to vote with their wallet. And I think that's a very powerful mechanism that I would definitely like. One of the early ideas of Kagi, the search engine, was to have this sort of mechanism inside our search results. And whenever basically you click a search result, a portion of the revenue or profit will go toward the creator of that website.
I love
And
that.
it will just wait for them until one day they log in into our webmaster tools and say, a stash of money. Obviously, for that to be a stash of money, Kagi needs to have much more than 30,000 users
Yeah,
for that to be meaningful. But that is the path towards the monetization of content, which I think is far more superior than create anything, slam ads, and then it is what it is, because that just creates a huge amounts of low quality content and creates economy with very few winners and a bunch of people who are barely making a living, if at all, while not really contributing uh, to the web in the way they could. So yeah, I think that's a very powerful mechanism that we definitely like to explore more and learn about as well.
yeah, I think that's awesome. I mean, and just practically speaking, on that point, I also don't want to oversell where we are as an Nostr community. I think we have incredible potential, and the principles are right. There are certainly examples of some artists who have done better in sort of Nostr and receiving Bitcoin's apps. I would say that number is still small, to be just very frank. But I think the potential is there for it to be something very mainstream. Um, I did one of my earlier pods on ideas from the edges with the founder of Wavelake. So he's one of the kind of music focused Nostr value for value guys. I would definitely recommend checking that out. And then I'm sure there's a ton of podcasts, including I just released actually a panel this morning that has Oscar, the founder of Fountain, on there. And he's done a lot with podcasters and podcasting 2.0, Nostr, and now with music as well. I think one of the most powerful examples of showing the power of Nostr is a lot of people kind of lump it in with other quote unquote social media platforms or protocols. And I'm curious to hear your experience with other ones. I know Blue Sky, as an example, has been getting a lot of attention lately, but I, increasingly don't think of Nostr as even competitive with that or with Twitter. In fact, I think if we're successful, all of these platforms or projects end up plugging into Nostr, including Twitter. I That's my grand hope is that one day Elon plugs in, and I think he will. And so what I think Nostr is, forget the social media stuff. That's where we started, and I think the social media use case is interesting because it's a water cooler of sorts for the hackers to hang out together and talk about their projects. But to me, I'm not even a big social media guy. In fact, I kind of like have a love hate relationship with Twitter anyway. I think it's cool, but often like a giant waste of attention and time. But what I see as Nostr is, you know, it's this it's this user-owned identity that can be plugged in with anything. And critically, I'm sure you've already gotten this, but I think there are a couple of principles that are very important it shares with the Bitcoin community and the reason it came out of the Bitcoin community, besides just Bitcoiners being into it. One is that you can generate your own identity. So critically, your Nostr identity is a public-private key pair. Interestingly, it's a Bitcoin key. It doesn't have to be. There's some cool things that'll come out of that. But the key insight is that you could, with a pair of dice and your own entropy, you could create your own identity. So it's totally permissionless. You don't need any company, any government, anyone. Like if you want to create an identity, rock and roll. So that's number one. And then number two, you've got this free market of relays. Well, I guess actually number two is that every note you sign, usually it's a JSON sort of blob with 7 fields. That's the kind one message, which is the most common kind. But it's just a sign. It's a signed JSON. And that's important because then I think particularly, where you guys are focused and something that could be really important to you is, again, as everything becomes AI generated spam, how do I know that what someone posted is actually from their account? Like even, I remember on Twitter when Biden was posting, that he was dropping out of the race and no one heard from him from several days. I remember like, we were all like, everyone that I talked to, why would we believe this? I mean, like, how do we know that he's not even dead? There's literally no reason to believe this was signed by that guy. And I believe that's going to get much worse in the coming years. So that's number two, is every message is signed. Then number three is it's posted to a free market of relays, which is important because especially if those relays are in different jurisdictions, different states, then as long as one of them is up, then you can take the data and build what you want with it. So I would say those are the kind of three key principles. And I don't think any of these other, social media protocols have all of those. And so what you start realizing is social media, in my mind, is like the least interesting thing about Nostr. The coolest thing that I would say right now is what Fountain has done, Wavelake too, but being able to take my graph from Primal or Damus or one of these Twitter-like clients, take my private key, use that to log into Fountain, and then see what podcast, or as of today, they just launched a radio station on Fountain, what music my friends are listening to. That's incredible. And that kind of social discovery, you could imagine any app on the web would be strictly better if you could bring your own identity with you. Imagine a recruiting app or a dating app or whatever, where you could say, I want to see and find the right person based on what music they listen to, who they follow on Twitter, like all of these different things, what they've reviewed on Goodreads, what recipes they've got, like all these different sites have their own identity would be strictly better with one identity that you control, full stop. So anyways, that's one of the things that gets me really excited, is not thinking of it as a social media thing, but thinking of it as identity for the web. And then obviously I think that the payment piece that you talked about is really powerful too.
Wow, you said a lot.
Yeah, sorry. No, I know. I'm spitting.
So, and I can see your eyes glow as you talk about this technology. So, I can offer my view as a newcomer to this,
Please.
and I would say that, and maybe it's useful, maybe it's not, but it's something I can clearly see, and that I want to share with you and others in the community. So first, fundamentally, the principles are sound. I think, privacy focused, being in control, and being able to transact, whether that is with, monetary value or credibility as the currency, I think is super powerful. So it's not anymore data, not anymore. It's um, your money or credibility. So I think fundamental principle is fantastic. Now, in terms of user experience and
We got a ways to go.
how do you get to my wife using this?
Mm.
And again, she's smarter than me, and she would have very hard time setting this up and participating in this economy. And even I still, it's very tricky. So I think that is the fundamental challenge of the technology, and maybe not an easy one to solve. I mean, as you were speaking, you said a number of of terms like, Bitcoin key, public, private, JSON blob. Like you can imagine that for 99.99% of people, that's gibberish. It's just profoundly uh, difficult to understand.
Right.
So I think that is the main. I mean, I'm sure the community is aware of that, but from a standpoint of adoption of technology, if my grandma cannot use it, it's not going to become a widely used technology, and so that's the beauty, for general purpose products like what we are building. The search engine we are building is also built for my grandma to use, and so we try to pay a lot of attention to quality of product and simplicity, and there's a lot of attention spent on how do you do that. Now, I want to build a feature in my browser where I can send my grandma money to her browser with a click of a button.
Yeah.
That is my goal for the application of this technology, for example. So this is how simple it should be. So I should have a button and whatever list of friends or contacts in my browser, and I can say send this money to my grandma, and should take like 2 clicks. And you would think that this technology already exists, but that's not the case. I've been really curious and especially from the crypto community, to learn more how, and I have friends who have very successful crypto or startups in the crypto space, and building infrastructure and all that. And I asked them, like, can you send me a document? How do I integrate this in my browser in a way that it's 2 clicks for me to send money to my grandma?
Yeah.
And we would be the first browser to implement it, and they couldn't. So from the user experience standpoint, uh, I think there are ways to go, and perhaps more focus should be on that onboarding aspects and making this really, really easy. And I know there are some people who are doing that. I remember talking to Bob
Yeah.
at your event, and I know he's working on applications of this. We should probably get in touch. But yeah, it's also it's not enough to just create a technology that's profoundly superior and has the right principles, but it's also about the user experience. And
Yeah.
how do you don't want it to be the opposite of the tax on the least tax savvy, and this to be a privilege of the most tax savvy, right?
Yeah. No, you're totally right.
Sort of. So yeah.
So what I would say, I mean, like, you've hit the nail on the head with all of that. One caveat I will say, just from a sort of hopeful perspective, is it's still very young, right? I mean, I think 2 years ago is when Jack got involved and kind of like tweeted about it and made it go mainstream, and like it clearly wasn't ready for normies then, and it's not yet. Still, it's getting there.
Mm.
But honestly, Vlad, I mean, my take on all of that would be everything you just described is opportunity, right? It's opportunity for entrepreneurs like yourself. And the way I look at it is, I've been very fortunate to invest in a number of companies in this space, many of whom I think are incredible builders, like a couple, and I'm obviously happy to connect you offline with folks like this, Bob, what he's doing. And there's some things like Nostr Wallet Connect, which I can talk more about, but it makes it a lot easier to connect things like a Lightning wallet or dollar denominated wallet with some of this technology. And that I think only got started, I don't know, less than 12 months ago. So we're still very early in that technology. But people like Bob, Million with Primal, just today released Primal 2.0. I would say it's probably the easiest normal person onboarding experience there is. So if you haven't played with Primal yet, the new release was literally just today. It's gotten a lot easier. I think Fountain is one of the better apps as well on the podcasting side that uses Nostr. Oscar is a fantastic builder. Million had sold a company prior as well, so he's like a solid entrepreneur. Oscar has as well, was a YC founder before. Albi guys, I think frankly they've done some of the absolute best, but they're also trying to do really complex things like non-custodial wallets. And frankly, a lot of this stuff is very complicated because in order to do some of this payment stuff, now again, Nostr Wallet Connect is making it easier, but you needed things like, if you wanted wanted to make it really easy, for the user, you needed like money transmission licenses, and that might be changing now, just like slightly different political, frameworks. But it has been challenging. All of that to say, though, even though I love all of those guys, and love working with all of them, the reality is, if you look at where we are on the adoption curve, even for Bitcoin alone, let alone for Nostr, it's so early. And my buddy DK, who you might have met at my event, we do a Nostr podcast together as well called Nostr News. It's more occasional now whenever we have the time. But he wrote a beautiful piece yesterday called "You're Still Early to Bitcoin," but I would say you're even earlier to Nostr, which is to say it's these technologies that I think will win because they are so profoundly just better. They offer features that nothing else do, which are really critical. But they're nowhere near being user friendly yet. But that's where entrepreneurs like yourself, and I'm hopeful that, not just you, but like hundreds of entrepreneurs like you come in and frankly make money. And you're making money by solving those problems. Like, I would say, with the exception of some of those companies and a few others that I just listed right now, the majority of the Nostr community are really smart, really good hackers, but they're hackers, right? And so it was like trying to, use the web in, I don't know, 94 or something. Like, unless you were a hacker, like you just couldn't do it. But that means that all those entrepreneurs like yourself who could both speak to the hackers, but also deliver, real solid user experiences, that's profit. And so I would just say that's opportunity for you and a lot of people like you.
For sure, I guess there are a lot of Steve Wozniaks in the Nostr space, and
Yes, a
they
lot.
need their Steve Jobs is a little bit, right?
Exactly.
To simplify some of that thing and make it consumable by masses. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with that. And yeah, as I say, excited to be learning more about this and, meeting all these nice people and trying to figure out how do we integrate and implement the learnings and the technologies that already have been developed into, these sort of mainstream products, which are search and browsers. So
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
just a couple ideas that I'll rip right now, and then I'm curious if you have any, ideas or things you want to play with. I mean, for starters, so for guys who haven't played with it yet, in addition to Kagi, Vlad, and I guess the Kagi, company have built Orion, which is a really, really solid browser as well. Like step one, like embedding a Nostr key identity and Bitcoin wallet into that would be huge. And if you haven't used Albi yet, their browser extension is absolutely sick, but it's still an extension. Having a native, like a browser that natively speaks Nostr and Lightning, I think would be absolutely game changer. So maybe that's
Mhm.
one area to start that I would, maybe think about. That obviously I know is not going to be simple. It's not something you could do overnight, and I don't know where that would fall in your sort of prioritization. Perhaps two easier things that could be interesting. One would be for you guys to consider running a relay, and there's a lot of issues. It's not necessarily as trivial as it first seems to be able to do that, and then on top of that, potentially to do some serious indexing. My understanding is maybe at some point you guys were already indexing Nostr. Is that true? Were
Yeah,
you already running a
parts of
relay?
it we were experimenting with that, but we haven't gone all in
Yeah.
yet. So it's part of the exploratory process we're in. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think, just in terms of like a step zero and step one, step zero, just running a relay and getting your sort of feet wet, letting the community use your relay, like that would be a probably relatively low lift way to get started. And then, yeah, I mean, my dream as a both Nostr user and Kagi user would be able to use Kagi as my sort of default Nostr search engine as well. I don't know if it would be a setting within Kagi, if, the results would be sort of embedded with other results. There's another project which I also love called Nostr.band, and that was the first Nostr
Mhm.
search engine. And Artur is also someone fantastic, worth connecting with if you're interested. He's a like 12 out of 10 hacker as well. But he's working on like 5 different projects, and he launched that search engine just because we needed some kind of search engine. But that's not his like primary project. Similarly, Million just released much better search today in Primal. But again, that's not like anyone's primary focus. So I think,
Mhm.
another dream situation would be if Kagi became the like Google level search engine for Nostr. That would be really powerful for the community as well.
I mean, those are all great ideas. So much to do.
Yeah, so much to do. Cool. Um, I had a couple of other kind of like large picture questions maybe we can wrap up with. Are there any other questions though you have for me, or maybe questions you want to just put out to the Nostr community that maybe folks can, you know, respond to?
Yeah, I mean, in general, we are now in Nostr, presence there. Reach out to us um, with ideas.
Yeah.
Um, tell us what we can do. We are still learning. We're just at the beginning, so open to learning more.
Cool. And just to, really speak for Vlad here a little bit. Like these guys at Kagi, if you aren't watching, they ship. These guys are not talkers. Like you just watch. Literally, I think you have a ship log on Kagi. It's like every day. You ship like this guy Pablo F7Z. If you haven't found him on Nostr, he's probably the most prolific hacker I've ever seen in my entire life.
Right.
And I would say you guys are about neck and neck at shipping speed. So if that gives listeners any idea of how the Kagi team is.
Yeah. We have a culture of shipping. It's not every day. It's every week, but it's a pretty extensive change log every time. Yeah.
Cool. Couple of sort of just like final areas I'd love to touch on briefly with you. One is AI. I know Kagi started
Mhm.
kind of more focused on AI. I know you have a really nice universal summarizer and sort of assistant. I also know from both some reading some of your blog posts and our prior conversations that one of your dreams for Kagi is to get to I forget what it's called. Was it Newton, the Apple sort of like general
The
knowledge
knowledge
explorer?
navigator.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
thing. The knowledge
Yeah.
navigator.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Would love to just understand like, two things. One, what is your current take on AI? How far will LLMs get us towards the knowledge navigator? And two, what is your dream vision for what's possible with Kagi as an assistant in the near term?
Yeah, that's a $1 trillion question.
Only softballs on ideas from the edge.
Yeah, well, let's decompose that a little bit. So, we all grew up with this vision of the future where, you know, you have Star Trek and people talk to this onboard computer and whatever, like the science fiction movie always has the you know AI that knows everything and is never wrong and is sometimes even so um, smart that it turns on their makers, right? So that's the vision of AI that we have been uh, basically consuming for the last few decades. And from the information consumption standpoint, for the longest time, we had search engine was the best we could do. And there were some attempts like Siri or Alexa, like to get us a step closer to this vision of you ask a question, you get comprehensive answer and move on with your day. But it really never worked. As the technology wasn't there. And then since last year when the GPT 3.5 came out, and I guess that was 2 years ago, we suddenly had a sort of a glimpse into what it could look like when we have the right technology, and it seemed magical, and for many it still is. Um, I'm still not convinced that this is the technology that will get us there, and the very limitation of the technology where it's basically not reasoning but predicting next token, that is a very fundamental limitation, and obviously humans are not working in that way, and any sort of reasoning known to us is not working in a way that you train something on ton of data and then you produce the next token. um, So I have to say I'm still somewhat skeptical that this will bring us to the Star Trek level AI or the knowledge navigator vision from Apple in '87, for that matter. Strictly because in those visions, that AI never needed to be fact checked. Nobody ever questioned the Star Trek computer. When it said something, it was done,
Right.
right? Um, and that's sort of a the elder in the village sort of authority. Like what they know is the ground truth, right? And they say something that's it. Like there's nobody smarter than them. And this technology is definitely not of that sort. Now, what we are trying to do, and many other companies are trying to do, is to augment this technology in a way where at least it gets more useful and accurate, at least from a search and information consumption standpoint. And you can create an AI or an LLM that's augmented with search results, with live search results. And this is where it gets closer to having more accurate, or very close, but still not perfect, um, to that sort of Star Trek AI, but still uh, noticeably far away as well. Like you can only maybe ask general type questions, but it has nothing, it doesn't know anything about you, doesn't know anything about your habits, cannot do anything really to help you with your life. Can
Right.
just maybe find information. It's far away from being an assistant. Whether this can get us there, as I say, I'm not 100% sure. We are definitely investing in this space because the interface this creates and allows, I think, is superior to seeing 10 links in the search, for example. Like for many queries, just getting an answer versus searching for yourself, I think, is very powerful. On the other hand, you want to be mindful of the fact that um, when you let that happen, basically the AI is making decisions on your behalf. So it's choosing the answer, the sources, choosing what it decides to be the answer. So that can run into potential issues. And I think it's still valuable for us to keep that part of humanity intact, like reasoning and researching and thinking for ourselves. So from a standpoint of Kagi, we are not all in into this and saying this is as good as cure as cancer. Our mission is to humanize the web, and we are approaching this in a pragmatic way where I want, if this technology succeeds, I want it implemented in a way that is preserving our humanity and still um, while still being helpful. So I'm trying to think of it more as a hammer
Yeah.
than a replacement for mind, right? And that is very challenging. Or it's a good challenge how you integrate it, how you think about it in a way. And for example, in Kagi, all of the AI tools are on demand. We don't push it in front of you, and it's just we're trying to be mindful about it. We have all of the most current models. They are grounded in Kagi search, which is probably the best search you can buy. I can definitely say it's the best search you can buy.
I like
It's
it.
the only search you can buy, but it's probably the best overall. So when you marry these powerful models with best search engine, you probably get closest to most accurate information you can get. But we are still not pushing this aggressively on the users and are trying to figure out what is the best way to interact with these tools,
Yeah.
given these constraints. So,
And as you integrate some of these models and stuff, just to be clear, in addition to offering potentially the best answers by integrating both the models and your search engine, you also guys you're focused on privacy, right? So like if I'm doing a search on Kagi and I end up talking with an OpenAI model, like you're not getting that data, Sam's not getting that data. Is that correct?
well, we are using OpenAI and Anthropic and all the others, and they claim in their terms of service and privacy policies that API usage is, not going towards training of these models, and it's privacy respecting. So I'm going to make a claim that is as good as their claim.
Right.
So on
Fair
the
enough.
face of things, yeah, I mean, you just want to be transparent there. It should be more private than using OpenAI directly if you use it through Kagi, because we use it through the API, which has these restrictions. Uh, so I'll stop there.
Will you use open source models as well? Or if I'm a user, can I
Yeah,
choose to say, hey, I only want to use something like Llama and I don't want
yeah.
OpenAI getting my
We are
data?
agnostic, and we try to offer the best models out there, so you can use the biggest llama, the 405 billion llama inside Kagi, but you can also use GPT-4, you can use Claude, all the latest. It's up to the user. We are really agnostic towards that. We are not creating our own models. We just try to leverage the best technology out there. What we offer to this is our search results.
Yeah.
So when you augment the model with, very good search results, you tend to get much better search experience. So,
And for the users who may be familiar, maybe not yet with Kagi, but with similar kinds of startups, like how would you say you compare to something like a Perplexity right now?
I think Kagi Assistant is comparable, if not better, because all of us use the same models. So the difference is really the search results.
Yeah.
And again, Kagi's been working on a search engine for the last 6 years. A lot of people pay because the search results are just the best possible. So I think that ultimately, search results prevail there. We
Yeah.
all will be always using the same models. I cannot imagine. Well, it can be that OpenAI at some point creates a model that's so powerful they don't want to share with everybody else, but that's a different situation then. But for now, all startups are using all models, and the quality of output is really about the quality of search results you feed into the LLM.
Yeah. So it makes sense.
So
And one more thing you're augmenting your results or your models with, if I'm correct, is you guys are, to the best of my knowledge, the only search engine and or AI company integrating with Wolfram Alpha. Is that true? And if so, how did that come about and what do you get from that integration?
yeah, well, I'm not going to make the claim that we are the only one, but we definitely integrate with Wolfram. Actually, Stephen Wolfram is on our board of advisors, and we have a very good relationship with him. And I think integrated with something like Wolfram is super important in a day and age where the web itself is, getting more and more of this LLM generated content. So you really want to make sure that you have ground truth somewhere. And Wolfram Alpha is basically a knowledge computational engine. It's not a generative engine. So when you ground, Kagi uses both the web results and the Wolfram results, and this helps it really maintain accuracy of information. Like we would always try to get information from Wolfram first, and then use the web to augment that if needed. But yeah, it's all about getting the most accurate information. Yeah.
Super cool. And I know at some point I would love to do a whole nother pod just on Stephen Wolfram and his theories. I know he has some pretty interesting and out there rabbit holes as well. But we'll save that for another day. One kind of last question for you to wrap everything up. It seems like in many ways things are accelerating faster than ever. Technology, it seems like the abundance of information. I particularly, I don't know if you know this, but I come from the energy world first and foremost. I've been watching the cost of solar and solar plus storage increasingly, get to zero marginal cost energy. With all of these things happening, AI, really cheap energy, it seems like, we might be racing towards some kind of singularity. I don't know if you would agree with that term. When you think, 20-ish years out, what's your best guess at what has stayed the same in the world and what looks radically different or what is just completely impossible to predict?
Hmm.
Easy
Right.
question to end with. Really easy one.
um, yeah, I think, from a standpoint of singularities coming, I think every major technological breakthrough throughout the human history created that sort of effect. Like we thought, probably the civilization at the time thought, like, this is the most powerful thing ever. And, like even when we conquered fire, I'm sure there were some people thinking this is going to lead to whatever
Singularity is near.
the definition of singularity was at that time. Like because the breakthrough was so profound and far-reaching from whatever the beginning point was that it must have felt. And I think we went through many such events in throughout the human history. So I don't believe in that concept so to speak. I think there's always going to be a new, like, there's this paradigm of, um, how advanced civilization is, in terms of harnessing the its own planet's energy,
Kardashev, of course.
its solar, Kardashev number. So, we are like something like whatever, zero point 0.3. Like we are not even harnessing our own solar, not our own planet, let alone the solar system with Dyson sphere or whatnot, and then let alone the galaxy. So if we are zero point 0.3, then whatever is happening right now probably going to move us to like 0.35 or zero point 0.4. Like in the grand scale of things, you can imagine how far away we are from, putting the Dyson sphere around the sun, for example, which would get us only to half of that scale. So in those terms, those things just feel very, very far away. And what we are experiencing are just local minimums that, can get us excited, should get us excited. But in the great scale of things, I think are just, local minimums that advances a little bit. So I'm not a fan of thinking, singularity is near and it's going to happen in our lifetimes and whatnot. I'm trying to be practical and think more about life and how to get most of it. Um, I'm probably halfway through mine, and so trying to stay in touch with reality more, sort of.
I
Yeah.
like that. Those are good, wise words to end on. Any last closing thoughts or any advice on where folks, if they have particularly Nostr ideas, can reach out to you to give you the much needed product feedback? I'm sure you want to add to your to do list.
Sure. The most direct way to reach me is Vlad at Kagi.com. So my inbox is open to everybody. We also have a feedback forum at kagifeedback.org if you want to make public feedback that others can see, participate, add to. So those are, I think, the two most direct ways. And obviously, we have started our Nostr presence yesterday. So, come and say hi. And we'd love to interact.
Sweet. Well, with that, thank you so much, Vlad. This has been a real treat, and yeah, we'll leave it at that until next time.
Thanks. It was great. Thanks.